Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people I've connected with over the years in the world of arts and entertainment. And today we're doing a shameless plugs edition with Jonathan Holiff. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thanks, Tommy. It's great to see you again.
Likewise. So we're here today to talk about a huge event that's about to happen in about a week's time in London, Ontario. And for those who don't know, your dad, Saul Holiff, managed Johnny Cash at the height of his career and perhaps the most important period of his career. And in recent years, you've made some discoveries that are now coming to light thanks to you in your role as a director. And you've already released one movie. There is another about to hit in about a year's time, and we're going to have a special preview right here in London, starting at noon on June 26th, um, at the McKellar Room at the University of Western Ontario, and then we're going to have a special after party at the London Music Hall of Fame. So, what's prompted this whole thing?
Well, thank you, Tommy. Just one quick correction. The free live show at Western University starts at 4 p.m. and it goes to 6 p.m. So that's 2 hours. It's free, and there's a limit of 10 tickets per person. We're in a huge auditorium, Tommy. There's 350 seats there. And so far, we've given away 150 tickets. Now, that sounds good, but it means as of today, I'll be speaking to a room that's half empty. And I'd like to see a little bit more support for a free event in my hometown of London, Ontario. The event is called Johnny Cash, The London Experience. And we're going to be watching a brand new 60-minute video, which could be also called the Saul Holiff story. Because as you pointed out, I'm making a new movie. It comes out in about a year. It's going to be big. It's called Johnny Cash, The Lost Tour of Newfoundland. And when I pitched this movie, I had people coming to me saying, you should put a museum in London. And by the way, when we talk about the word museum, we're not talking about the Hall of Fame. We're not even talking about a Johnny Cash museum like they have in Nashville. That's all so 1990s, dude. This is what's called an immersive exhibit. It's experiential, they say. Basically, we get rid of the dusty, 8x10s hanging from a rusty nail on the wall. We get rid of the plexiglass where you could look at an original ticket. If you want that, go to Nashville. But if you want the real inside story, the London story, and you want to go for an experience like you would go to IMAX, and you would walk through our place, and you'd put on headsets, and you'd listen to recorded phone calls between Johnny and my dad. You'd listen to all sorts of inside dope that's never been published. You'll be able to watch and experience fully edited feature film quality scenes depicting every major event that happened around London and the world. Because while you correctly noted that Saul was there at Johnny's height, what it's important for people to know is that nobody knew Johnny Cash in 1958 in London, Ontario, when Johnny tapped my dad to be his manager. Johnny and Elvis had just left Sun Records. Elvis went to Capitol and he went straight to the moon in terms of capturing that all-important popular audience. As you know, Tommy, Sun Records in 1958 was a regional power. In 1958, Billboard magazine didn't even have a country chart. That's why these guys had to leave Sun. But Johnny went to Columbia and he tanked. He tanked, Tommy. And he wanted to catch Elvis. And so he tapped my dad in 1961, also in London, after my dad had produced all of Cash's shows in Canada since 1958. And he had one one request, one demand of my dad. He said, Saul, I want to catch Elvis Presley. And my dad said, then you need television. And they immediately got to work on what back in the day, today we call it a demo tape. But Tommy, you don't have any gray hairs, but I know you're about my age, dude. And you remember that in the 1960s, if you wanted a copy of your show, you'd have to ask for the kinescope. And it was like a copy, a struck copy of the film. They shot 16 millimeter in those days. And so Johnny Cash sent to my dad in London, Ontario in 1961 a kinescope by shipping to London. It nearly went to London, England, because the Americans didn't know that London, Canada exists. And so I find in trying to set up this free show in my hometown, everybody thinks I'm some kind of carpetbagger trying to make money on Johnny Cash. But the thing is, Londoners have forgotten. They've forgotten their own history. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm a preservationist at heart. I'm trying to preserve these stories. And I know I'm yelling now, but I'm 1 week away from a show where I'm going to be talking to half a room unless we can turn this around. And I'm telling you that this story will put London back on the map.
Absolutely, that's the hope. And as you say, Londoners have forgotten. A lot of people know about the famous proposal that happened at the London Gardens, but not many people know about the connection in London between your dad and the man in black.
I've
So,
got I've got a quick story for you about
okay.
that. First of all, you walk downtown, you see this beautiful mural on the side of the building. It's not a photo from 1968, guys. Look at the hair length. Look at the clothing. If anybody knew their history, if anybody picked up the phone and called me, I could have given them a photo from the proposal.
Hmm.
But instead, they did a beautiful mural. I think the artist is fantastic. But shouldn't it be a photo from the actual proposal rather than something from the early 1970s? Now, if you come to my show at 4 o'clock on June 26th, you're going to not just see June Carter on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson tell us all that it was Saul Holiff who introduced her to Johnny Cash. It was Saul Holiff who put them up to the proposal in London, Ontario. And for your viewers who know Daniel Mailer, Dan Mailer, London Lights, Cablecast show, he tells a story on video at my show on the 26th about what happened after Johnny proposed to June that night. Would you like to know, Tommy, what happened after that show?
I'm sure everybody would love to know.
Okay, well, I didn't even know until last week. And I was there, but I was only 3 years old. So Daniel Mailer calls me. He says, I told you that story about the party at your house. And I said, I thought you were talking about a different party, Dan. So Dan was about what, 7 years old. And in 1968, on February 23rd, the day after the proposal, his dad was a milkman in London. His dad delivered our milk. Do you remember back in the day, Tommy, with no gray hair, that it used to be bottles and
Yeah.
they'd leave them at your front door and they had these kind of weird kind of metallic caps that you sort of ripped off and that was your bottle of milk? Well, Daniel Mailer tells a story that you can hear if you come to my show about going with his dad when he was 7 years old, delivering milk to my place, 509 Jarvis Street, London, Ontario, right near Springbank Park. And they showed up the morning after, and there was stuff all over the lawn and all over the driveway. And his dad turned to Daniel and he said, they must have had that engagement party here last night. And that is true. That's what happened. But they made me go to bed because I was 3 years old.
Oh, the stories you could tell if you were 13 at the time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no kidding. And you mentioned those milk bottles. I grew up in North Bay, Ontario. So a lot of the times, by the time we got it, the cream had risen, frozen.
Right, right.
like that. So we didn't have to take the cap off.
Oh man, we are so old.
So we didn't have to take the cap off.
Oh man, we are so old.
Yeah. Oh, especially me. Anyway, uh, so there's a lot happening next week here in London, and I think maybe we should give the viewers a sample of one of the promotional videos. What do you think?
I think that's great.
All right, well, let's hit play on that.
It was a very dangerous situation up there on the Newfoundland tour. Cash, of course, was taking pills and had to leave the show for a while. It was a situation where his voice was just giving out. They asked me to do that final spot on the show. I was recording for Columbia Records at that time, and the second highest rated television show in the world was Have Gun Will Travel. They told me that I was playing to 350 million people a week with that theme song of that show. So the people in the audience were familiar with me for that particular thing. Working with Johnny, I usually introduced him on all the shows. So we had an extremely close relationship, and he always felt that I could jump in if necessary. That made it very easy for me to do the fill-in for Johnny when he was not able to perform on those dates. In fact, some of the pictures that I have seen of that particular tour of the Moose Hunt, shot from behind with the back of the stage and then looking at the audience, it is me at the microphone. When I first started with him in 1958, he was straight as a string, did not drink, was not into amphetamines, was having a great time. But as we got into the very early 60s and the amphetamines began to take over, I saw a change in personality. They took control of his personality to the place where we didn't know whether he was going to speak to us except on stage or whether everything was going to be the way it used to be.
I had become habituated to amphetamines and barbiturates and alcohol, all three at the same time. I got up to a habit of as many as 100 pills a day and a case of beer. And there's a lot of people OD'd on a lot less than that.
Well, isn't that interesting, man? I'll tell you, there's a lot that goes into this story, and we're going to be fortunate enough to be able to share a lot of it with the people in London. And you gotta get these tickets, people. They're free. You can't get much cheaper than free. So there's going to be a lot happening, and then the after party happens downtown at the London Music Hall of Fame. There is going to be some entertainment, and among those entertainers is your niece, Kelly.
Yes, she would be actually my second cousin. Her father, Gary Holiff, actually starred in my first movie as our on-screen Saul Holiff at 50. Now, his daughter, Kelly Holiff, a gorgeous blonde, just coincidentally spent the last 3 months starring in the Ring of Fire musical at the Grand Theater. And she's going to come up and do one song. And she's going to be followed by a wonderful guy from, I guess, 100 miles away from London named Paul Henry Dallaire.
Hmm.
And Paul Henry Dallaire is a retired mortuary guy who just happened to have recorded what I think is one of the best, if not the best, tribute songs ever done for Johnny Cash. Paul Henry recorded this in Ontario the day after Johnny died in 2003. And it's called the Johnny Cash Song. And you can hear it on my Facebook pages or on my YouTube channel, or you can come and see him live. And then after those two do one song at the HOF in London, the big star comes on board for 3 songs. And that is David James from David James and Big River. David James was the star of my first movie 10 years ago, My Father and the Man in Black, but you didn't see him on camera because he sounds so much like Johnny that I asked him to read all of Johnny's letters in my movie. and I had someone who sounded like Saul read Saul's letters to Johnny, and someone who sounded like June read her letters to both guys in the 60s and 70s. But you're going to get to see David James in person, and he's the best Johnny Cash tribute artist in Canada, bar none.
Wow. So there is a lot happening on June 26th. That's a Wednesday, the middle of the week. And we're all looking forward to it. We're going to try and spread the news as best we can. And let's just hope that this thing really, really goes off and that we are able to set up the permanent exhibit as you have in the works. I know you're a busy guy, Jonathan. I don't want to take up your whole day. But I do want to thank you so much once again for taking the time out of your day to do this with me. And until next time, cheers.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including recording, editing, guest acquisition, etc. And hey, here's some news. We've just recently joined forces with 519 Magazine, so you can check out my interviews there as well. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn, all rights reserved. If you enjoy the show and you'd like to help us keep it going, why don't you click on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. We really appreciate it. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, cheers.